It's not happening.
Yeah, is it official yet, or is that just the...
I don't know, but I mean, it sounds like it's official, but not official, but is official.
Okay.
Anyways, for people who are oblivious to what Paul and I just talked about previous to this,
who don't have a mind melt with both of us.
Paul and I had a small conversation before the podcast started and just rolled right into it without even discussing it.
I like that one sentence, which was a question, is now a conversation, because now we're just completely on the same page.
Yeah.
Yes, but anyway.
Anyways, NVIDIA, ARM, not going to be happening. Actually, it sounds like ARM is going to go public via IPO.
Which I guess satisfies the problem, right? Because when... there's been so much regulatory action on this, and complaints from the companies that utilize ARM. And, the question we always ask ourselves is, well, okay, but who is okay? Which company would, make this okay for you? And the answer is, there is no company. We just want ARM. So I guess maybe that's the solution.
Yeah. So it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And now they can do it with a hostile takeover just by buying all their public shares, I guess.
Wow. That's a good point.
I will, when I see IPO, I was like, man, I wonder if Microsoft would buy.
One way to get back into mobile, Microsoft could do to mobile what they might be. Well, I mean, Azure as the back end for rival game systems is kind of an interesting concept. The Microsoft wins even if they loses kind of thing. Although I think the dynamic has shifted there in a pretty major way, but whatever. Microsoft as the supplier to all of the mobile, well, actually not all, but yeah, no, I guess all. I mean, they're all technically ARM based, right? Apple, even the Tensor stuff from Google, et cetera, is, they utilize ARM reference designs. It is interesting to speculate.
Yeah, my setup is all jacked up. It's like very blue, and there's probably background noise because my water heater turned on.
I don't hear that.
That's our
background noise. As I was saying to my wife, it's like a symphony of noises out in the street in the morning. The moaning guy came by earlier, unfortunately, so you won't get to enjoy that. Tamale guy was by for the commuters.
Well, you're living the urban lifestyle down there. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in passing in something I wrote recently, but I've lived in a standalone home since since 1999, 98, I guess. So I've not. It's been a while on the apartment thing, and we've never lived in a big city. And
Are you saying Emmaus is not a big city, Paul?
No, I'm not saying it's not anything. Is what it's a borough, a township of some kind. It's a small place, but it's and I technically, by the way, live in a place called Lower Macungie. That's even smaller, but that's a technical Pennsylvania thing. Let's not worry about that. Yeah, so visiting many big cities over the years, domestically and internationally, I've always, there are pros and cons. I've always wanted to experience it, but I also had said to my wife at some point, I think she agreed, this is something we'll do for like 1 year. Yeah. And then we'll get that out of our system, at some point. And I think just being here for the past week or so has driven that home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot else going on other than that Microsoft's earnings at roughly 4:02 p.m. Eastern Time, maybe 4 or 5 p.m. Eastern Time is when that drops.
Is it that early?
Yeah, I mean, it's right after the bell hits, so...
Did we talk about the Pluton stuff yesterday? Because that's actually kind of interesting. And it's doubly interesting for me. Well, first of all, did we talk about it? I don't want to repeat ourselves, but do you remember?
Did we talk about what? I wasn't even
Pluton,
listening.
the Microsoft Pluton thing?
No, I don't think so.
I guess not. So, Microsoft developed this security chipset that you could think of as sort of a next-gen TPM something. And the big difference between it and TPM is that it integrates into processor chipsets, right? So AMD, Intel, and Qualcomm have all agreed to do this. At CES a couple weeks back, Lenovo was the company that announced the first PCs that will ship. They're based on AMD, interestingly. Intel is starting to back off from this a little bit. I don't know if you caught any of this. Intel kind of said, look, we have our own thing that's basically the same thing. Oh, I should say the big difference is it's in the chip, and the reason that's important is that some electronic attacks are now targeting the path between TPM and the CPU. So you integrate it inside. But we're starting to see the same complaints. And also it's made by Microsoft, right? Like TPM was made by some separate organization. It became basically an industry standard, whatever, or at least an ad hoc standard. But this is the same argument we had back in 2003. Longhorn was going to require TPM, remember, as part of, in the wake of the Palladium next generation secure computing based stuff that Microsoft did after Windows XP came out the gate really insecure. And, open source and Linux people hated it because they saw this as a way to keep Linux off of computers, although Linux, of course, now supports TPMs. But, the same kind of argument, right?
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing is, Pluton can be disabled. And so Lenovo, the first company that's going to ship PCs based on this technology, is going to ship them with this thing disabled. Right? It's like, wait, what? So if you're worried about getting Linux on such a computer, no worries. You just turn it off the BIOS or the firmware, whatever you call it these days. And people still refer to it as the BIOS, which I think is a little weird, but okay. It's interesting, Microsoft, I don't know. And this goes into the ARM thing. Microsoft has done a good job, I think, with GitHub, with Minecraft, things that people thought they would, suck in and make them really insular, and they haven't, So I think they don't have any particular hardware expertise per se, but they would be a good steward, I think, of ARM. But I think Microsoft, do you trust Microsoft on security? I mean, it's a loaded question, I guess, right? Especially if you're one of the few remaining x86 OS vendors out there or whatever. I don't know. It's interesting.
Windows 12 is going to require Pluton. You heard it here first.
That's a solid bingo card prediction.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be Windows 12. That would be way. I mean, considering how long it took them to force TPM, whatever it is, for Windows 11. So.
Right. Given the reaction to TPM 2.0 requirements for Windows 11, Microsoft naturally has decided to move on to the next thing. It's so Microsoft.
So widely well received. Everybody loved it. TPM 2.0.
It's fine. Honestly, it's fine. It's one of those things. If you didn't mention it, the truth is, I'm sure 90%-ish of the computers in the world that are sold go out with that stuff enabled and there, and nobody notices or cares. But as soon as you raise it as a requirement, it's like, well, hold on a second. What are you doing?
Well, it wasn't so much. It was also that they raised it as a requirement, but then they waffled on it. Like, well, if you have 1.2, you can maybe do it. 2.0, maybe.
If you're suggesting that Microsoft in some way did not communicate that effectively, I'm going to have to take a contrary stance.
Paul throughout the contrarian? Never in my life.
Half of the last 6 months was spent figuring out what the hell they were doing with this. Like, oh my God.
That was great.
Classic.
That was great. And if you've been losing sleep over Project Monarch, which is the unification of one email client to rule them all, it sounds like it's going to be shipping in the next update. Hilariously pinned to the taskbar alongside the mail app. So you'll have 2 mail apps shipping in Windows, which will be beautiful.
Which is also so Microsoft.
Exactly.
It's so Microsoft.
Yeah. Next, you're going to tell me they're going to ship with 3 browsers and an OS, and I'll be like, you're crazy. And then that happened. So,
how do you feel about a screen that offers you a choice of browsers?
Just don't call it a ballot. That would make me think of voting. That'd be terrible. Anyways, I guess we'll see what happens tomorrow with earnings. I'll be very curious to see what happens. They announced the Surface figure, because last year at this time it was, I think, $2 billion. It was their first $2 billion
that's a good point.
quarter.
That's right, the holiday quarter.
It'll be tough for them to get it, not because I don't think they would sell through, just because of supply chain.
Yeah, that's true. I think they had their strongest launch ever right before the quarter, or right at the beginning of the quarter, whenever that was. So, yeah, well, I guess we'll see.
We'll find out. 4:05 p.m. something. 4:05. Good.
675-309.
I wonder what Jenny's up to.